There are moments in life when it feels like we are waiting forever, waiting for a prayer to be answered, waiting for a door to open, waiting for healing, provision, or direction. And in those moments of waiting, it's natural to wonder if God is late, if he has forgotten us, or if somehow our lives are slipping out of his hands. But the truth is, God is never early and he is never late. His timing is always right. And that's hard for us to grasp because we live in a culture of instant gratification. We want things now. We have microwaves, instant messaging, same-day delivery, and streaming on demand. But God doesn't work on our timetable. He works on his. And his clock is always more accurate than ours. Think of it like this. If you've ever watched a symphony, you know the beauty of the music depends on every instrument coming in at just the right time. If the violins rush ahead or the horns delay, the harmony is ruined. The conductor sees the whole piece, the whole arrangement, and brings in every instrument exactly when it should join. That's how God works with our lives. We only see our part. He sees the whole masterpiece. One of the reasons God's timing is always right is because he sees what we cannot see. We are limited to this moment, this day, this year, but he sees the end from the beginning. He knows the chain reaction of events that one small decision will set off. He knows how one answered prayer now may actually harm us in the long run. So he waits. He delays. Not because he doesn't care, but because he cares too much to give us something at the wrong time. Another reason his timing is right is because waiting builds our faith. If everything happened instantly, we wouldn't need trust. Waiting forces us to stretch, to lean on him, to believe even when we don't understand. That's how our faith grows, through the seasons of waiting, not the moments of instant answers. Think about a seed. You plant it in the ground, and for weeks, sometimes months, you see nothing. You might even wonder if it's dead, but underneath the soil, life is happening. Roots are spreading, strength is forming, and when the time is right, it breaks through the surface. That's how God works in your life. Just because you don't see anything happening doesn't mean nothing is happening. His timing is preparing the roots before the fruit. And let's be honest, sometimes what feels like a delay is actually protection. We pray for an opportunity and it doesn't come. Later, we look back and realize if that had worked out, I would have been in over my head. I wasn't ready. It would have crushed me. God knows when we're ready, and his timing waits until our character can carry the blessing he wants to give. So what do you do while you wait? You don't waste the waiting. You worship in the waiting. You serve in the waiting. You keep doing the right thing even when you don't see results, because in due season at the right time, God's promise comes to pass. The delay is not a denial. The waiting is not wasted. The silence does not mean absence. God's timing is always right, because his timing is rooted in his love. And his love for you never fails. When we think about time, we measure it in hours, minutes, and seconds. We set schedules, we make plans, and we expect things to happen within a certain framework. But God's perspective on time is not limited the way ours is. We are like someone standing in the middle of a parade, only able to see the float that's in front of us. God, on the other hand, sees the entire parade from beginning to end at once. He knows what has already happened. He knows what's happening now, and he knows what will come long after we're gone. And do it, guys. That's why his timing is always right. We only have a snapshot, but he has the panoramic view. Many times in life we get frustrated because we don't understand why things aren't happening the way we want or when we want. We might feel like we are running out of time, or we missed our chance, or someone else got ahead of us. But that's because we are seeing only a fraction of the picture. God sees the consequences of every choice, the ripple effect of every decision, the hidden motives of every person involved, and he coordinates all of it in a way that aligns with his greater purpose. What looks to us like a delay may actually be God rearranging events behind the scenes so that everything falls into place perfectly when the right moment comes. It's a little like flying in an airplane. When you're on the ground, stuck in traffic, everything feels chaotic and messy. Cars are honking, people are frustrated, and it doesn't seem like there's any order at all. But when you rise above and look down from the sky, suddenly you see the whole system. Roads intersect, cars are moving in patterns, stoplights are guiding the flow, and there is order you couldn't see before. God has that higher view of your life. He sees where every road leads. He sees the obstacles you can't yet see, and he knows how to direct you so that you end up where you need to be at the exact right time. There are countless examples of this throughout history, and in Scripture. Think of Joseph in the Old Testament. If you only looked at his life one piece at a time, it didn't make sense. Betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, thrown into prison, it all seemed random and unfair. But God saw the whole picture. God knew that Joseph was being positioned to save an entire nation during a famine. If Joseph had been released from prison too early, or if he had never been sold into Egypt, he wouldn't have been in the place he needed to be when the crisis came. From Joseph's limited perspective, the timing seemed wrong. From God's perspective, it was perfect. The same truth plays out in our lives. We often try to write our stories according to our timeline. We imagine being married by a certain age, starting a career by a certain year, buying a home, having children, reaching milestones, all within a schedule we design. And when life doesn't cooperate with our script, we get discouraged. That's because we're trying to direct a story we can't fully see. God is the author, and he knows how every chapter leads into the next. He doesn't just see the page we're on, he sees the ending and every chapter in between. Sometimes the hardest part is that we see others getting what we've been praying for, and it feels unfair. We see friends finding success, people our age moving ahead in relationships, jobs, or opportunities, and we wonder if God overlooked us. Just because he's blessing someone else doesn't mean he has forgotten you. Their story is not your story. Their timing is not your timing. God knows what he is doing in your life, and he knows the exact moment when the doors need to open for you. If you rush ahead and force things on your own, you may end up in the wrong place at the wrong time. But if you trust God's timing, you will find yourself exactly where you're supposed to be, even if it's later than you imagine. Think about the seasons of the year. You can't plant in winter and expect a harvest the next week. The soil needs preparation, the seed needs time underground, the rain has to fall, the sun has to shine, and only then does the fruit appear. If you try to pick fruit before it's ripe, it won't taste right. It won't taste right. In the same way, God sees the season you're in. He knows whether it's time for planting, watering, pruning, or harvesting. To us, waiting feels wasted, but to God, waiting is working. Every season has its purpose, and the timing is always intentional. Our problem is that we live moment by moment, but God works lifetime by lifetime. He weaves our story into the stories of countless other people. Sometimes what feels like a setback for us is actually a setup for someone else. Sometimes what feels like a delay in our life is really God aligning events so that his plan blesses not just us, but many others through us. When you remember that God sees the whole picture, while you only see a piece, it changes how you view your circumstances. You stop panicking when things don't happen on your schedule. You stop doubting his goodness when the wait seems long. You begin to trust that the one who sees it all knows what he's doing. You may not understand the timing right now, but you can have peace knowing that nothing in your life is random, nothing is wasted, and nothing is overlooked by him. When we find ourselves in seasons of waiting, it can be one of the most difficult tests of our faith. Everything in us wants to move forward, to see results, to know that our prayers are being heard. Waiting feels passive, but in God's economy, waiting is one of the most active parts of spiritual growth. It stretches us, it challenges us, and it reveals what we truly believe. Faith is not tested when everything is happening quickly and smoothly. Faith is tested when we are asked to trust God in the silence, when nothing seems to change, and when the answers are delayed longer than we imagine. That is why waiting on God strengthens and grows our faith. If you think about muscles in the human body, they don't grow without resistance. When you lift weights, it is the tension, the struggle, and even the temporary tearing of the muscle fibers that create strength. In the same way, our spiritual muscles don't grow without resistance. Waiting is that resistance. It is the moment when we feel the tension between what God has promised and what we see in front of us. That gap between promise and fulfillment is where faith is built. If everything came instantly, we would never need to trust. We would never need to lean on God, and we would never learn perseverance. In Scripture, there are countless examples of people who had to wait. Abraham waited decades for the son God promised him. The Israelites wandered in the wilderness for 40 years before entering the land God said was theirs. David was anointed king as a young shepherd boy, but waited years through trials, battles, and rejection before he ever wore the crown. Each of them was being prepared in the waiting. Their faith was being strengthened so that when the promise came, they would have the character and endurance to carry it. When we wait, we often think nothing is happening, but something is happening inside us. Waiting exposes our impatience, our tendency to control, and our desire for instant gratification. It teaches us to surrender those impulses and trust that God's timing is better than ours. Every time we resist the urge to give up, every time we keep praying even when there's no immediate answer, every time we choose to worship instead of worry, our faith deepens. It's like adding another layer of strength to our foundation. Think about the process of growing a tree. If it shoots up too quickly without developing deep roots, the first storm will knock it down. But when growth is slow and steady, the roots have time to spread wide and deep, anchoring the tree so it can withstand the strongest winds. That's what waiting does for us. It drives our roots deeper into God's promises. It forces us to anchor ourselves not in quick results, but in His character. Over time, that produces a faith that isn't shaken by every storm, but one that remains steady no matter how long the wait. Sometimes we misinterpret waiting as punishment. We assume God is withholding something from us, or that we must have done something wrong. But waiting is not punishment. It is preparation. Just as an athlete trains before the competition or a student studies before the exam, we are being strengthened in the waiting so that when the appointed time comes, we are ready. Faith is not just about believing that God can do something. It's about trusting Him enough to wait for Him to do it His way. One of the most powerful lessons we learn in waiting is dependence. When you don't have what you want immediately, you learn to live daily with God's provision. Like the Israelites who received manna one day at a time in the wilderness, waiting teaches us to rely on God for each step instead of rushing ahead with our own solutions. If He gave us everything instantly, we would never learn to walk with Him day by day. Waiting develops intimacy because it keeps us in conversation with Him, keeps us seeking Him, and keeps us aware of our need for Him. There are also times when the waiting reveals whether we love the gift or the giver more. If God delays an answer, do we still seek Him or do we turn away in frustration? If He doesn't move on our schedule, do we stop praying or do we press in deeper? These moments expose the depth of our devotion. True faith is not just about receiving from God, it's about trusting Him even when the answer is not immediate. In life, the most valuable things rarely come quickly. Relationships take time to build. Skills take time to master. Character takes time to shape. And faith is no different. It takes seasons of waiting, of trusting, of enduring to become strong. That's why the waiting is not wasted. It is where God forms us, refines us, and proves His faithfulness in ways we could never see if everything happened instantly. Waiting on God doesn't just build faith for the moment, it builds faith for a lifetime. The lessons you learn in one season of delay become the strength you lean on in the next. The faith you build while waiting for one prayer to be answered becomes the foundation for believing Him with even bigger prayers in the future. Each waiting season becomes a stepping stone, preparing you for greater trust and greater blessings ahead. There are moments in life when what feels like the worst delay is actually a gift we don't recognize until much later. We get frustrated when the door doesn't open, when the relationship doesn't work out, when the opportunity passes us by, or when the prayer seems unanswered. From our perspective, it looks like God is holding something back. But from his perspective, it is his protection. We see only the immediate desire in front of us, but he sees the danger that lies beyond it. That's why delays are often God's way of protecting us from harm, even though at the time they feel like obstacles. Think of a parent with a small child. A child may cry because he wants to run into the street after a ball, but the parent holds him back. To the child, it feels unfair, it feels restrictive, but the parent knows there is danger he cannot see. Cars rushing by, risks far greater than a toy. In the same way, God sometimes withholds something we are reaching for, not because he wants to deny us joy, but because he knows it could bring harm we cannot see. We cry and feel disappointed, but he is saving us from something we may never even know was there. Many of us can look back over our lives and thank God for unanswered prayers. There are jobs we thought we wanted, relationships we thought would complete us, opportunities we thought were perfect. But if we had received them, they would have led to heartbreak, loss, or destruction. At the time, we couldn't understand the delay, but later, with hindsight, we realized the delay was God's protection. He closed the door because walking through it would have cost us more than we could handle. The Bible is full of examples of God's protective delays. When the Israelites left Egypt, God did not lead them on the shortest path to the promised land. Scripture says that if he had, they would have faced war with enemies they were not ready to fight, and they would have turned back in fear. So instead, he led them on a longer route through the wilderness. To them, it seemed like a delay, but in reality, it was his protection. He knew what battles they weren't yet ready for, and he sheltered them by redirecting their journey. In our lives, protection can come in many forms. Sometimes God delays a financial breakthrough because he knows our character isn't yet strong enough to handle it responsibly. Sometimes he delays a relationship because he knows we need to heal from past wounds before entering a new one. Sometimes he delays a dream because he knows that if it came too soon, pride or immaturity could ruin it. What feels like rejection is often redirection. The closed door isn't a punishment, it's a shield. Waiting and delays also protect us from ourselves. We are often quick to act on impulse, to chase after what looks appealing in the moment, but we don't always see the long-term consequences. God, in his mercy, slows us down, sometimes even halting us completely, to keep us from stepping into situations that could derail us. The delay forces us to pause, to reflect, and to let him refine our desires. By the time the opportunity does come, our hearts are better aligned with his will, and we are more prepared to handle it wisely. It's also worth noticing that not all protection is dramatic. Sometimes God's delays are about small, subtle safeguards. You might be running late and miss a train, only to later discover there was an accident you avoided. You might not get accepted into a program you applied for, only to realize later it would have locked you into a path that wasn't fulfilling. We often overlook these moments because they don't make headlines in our lives, but every delay that shifts our path away from harm is part of God's protective hand. Think of how a gardener tends to a vine. The gardener prunes branches not because he wants to harm the plant, but because he wants it to flourish. Cutting back feels painful, and to the plant, it may seem like loss, but the pruning actually protects it from growing in the wrong direction or becoming weighed down with fruit it cannot support. In the same way, God's delays prune us, shaping us, redirecting us, and protecting us from outcomes that would overwhelm us or stun our growth. When we realize that delays can be acts of protection, our perspective begins to shift. Instead of viewing them only as frustrating interruptions, we begin to see them as signs of God's care. He knows the dangers ahead. He knows the traps set before us. He knows the weaknesses within us. And so he shields us with delays, guarding us until we are ready, until the danger is past, or until his better plan is ready to be revealed. There is a hidden work of God that often goes unnoticed because it happens in seasons where nothing seems to be moving forward. These are the times when life feels quiet, when prayers seem unanswered, when opportunities appear distant, and when progress is invisible. In those moments, it can be tempting to think that nothing is happening, but in reality, God is preparing us in private before he reveals his plan in public. The waiting seasons are not wasted. They are the training ground where God shapes character, builds strength, and develops the foundation necessary to handle what he has in store. If you look at the life of David, you see this principle clearly. He was anointed king as a teenager, yet he didn't step into the throne immediately. Instead, he spent years tending sheep in obscurity, battling lions and bears, writing psalms in solitude, and even running for his life from Saul. To the outside world, those years looked insignificant, like wasted time. But in reality, they were the private preparation that developed David's courage, his worship, and his dependence on God. By the time he faced Goliath, he had already learned in private how to trust God in battles no one else had seen. The giant wasn't his first fight. It was just the first one people noticed. This pattern shows up again and again. Moses spent 40 years in the desert before leading Israel out of Egypt. Joseph spent years in prison before becoming second in command to Pharaoh. Even Jesus spent 30 years in quiet obedience before 3 years of public ministry. God works in hidden seasons because it is in the hidden place that he equips us for the visible assignment. Public platforms without private preparation collapse quickly, but when God builds you in private, what he does in you can sustain what he wants to do through you. We often resist these seasons because we equate visibility with value. If people don't see it, if it's not recognized, if it doesn't seem big, then we assume it doesn't matter. But some of the most important work God does in our lives happens when no one is watching. It is in the unseen hours of prayer, in the quiet choices of integrity, in the daily faithfulness to small responsibilities that God molds our hearts. He prepares us not for the applause of others, but for the weight of his purpose. Without those hidden years, we would not have the maturity to carry his blessings without being crushed by them. Private preparation also humbles us. It reminds us that the story is not about our glory, but his. When you have to serve faithfully in obscurity, when you have to keep showing up with no recognition, when you have to keep working behind the scenes without applause, it strips away pride. It teaches you that your identity is not in being seen, but in being faithful. Then when God does open the door and place you in a position of visibility, you are not chasing the spotlight. You are simply walking in obedience to the one who placed you there. Another important aspect of private preparation is skill development. Just as an athlete trains off the field or a musician practices before performing, God gives us seasons to sharpen our skills before entrusting us with greater responsibilities. A calling may be clear, but skills must be cultivated. The waiting gives space to grow in wisdom, patience, discipline, and resilience. When the opportunity finally arrives, you are not scrambling to learn. You are stepping into it with preparation already in place. There is also protection in being hidden. If God were to push us into visibility before we were ready, the pressure could overwhelm us. Criticism could destroy us. Temptations could derail us. Success could inflate us. In his mercy, he shelters us in private until our roots are deep enough to withstand the weight of what is coming. Just as a builder lays a strong foundation before constructing a tall building, God uses seasons of hidden preparation to build depth before height. In these times, it's easy to feel overlooked or forgotten, but being hidden is not the same as being abandoned. It is actually a sign of God's intentional care. He sees you. He knows what he's placed inside you. He knows the right timing to reveal it. Just because others don't see your progress doesn't mean you aren't growing. Just because the doors haven't opened yet doesn't mean he isn't working. In fact, much of the most important growth happens underground, like the roots of a tree. You don't see them developing, but without them, the tree could never stand. What God prepares in private always shows up in public eventually. The lessons you learn in secret, the faith you build in silence, the character you develop when no one notices, these are the very things God will use to support you when He places you in the open. Nothing is wasted. Every hidden season has purpose. Every unseen act of obedience is shaping you for what is ahead. When we think about timing, our natural assumption is that earlier is better. We want the answer as soon as possible, the breakthrough right away, the solution without delay. But God's timing is not based on our impatience. It is rooted in His unfailing love. His delays are not because He is ignoring us, punishing us, or withholding something out of cruelty. Every decision He makes about when and how to move in our lives comes from His deep, perfect love for us. If He says a not yet, it is because His love knows what is best. If He says a wait, it is because His love is orchestrating something better. His timing is not a reflection of neglect. It is an expression of care. One of the struggles we face is that we often interpret God's delays through the lens of fear. We think, oh, maybe He doesn't care about me. Maybe He forgot about me. Maybe my prayers don't matter. But the truth is, love is at the center of everything He does. A loving parent does not give a child everything they ask for immediately. Sometimes they say no, sometimes they say wait, and sometimes they provide something completely different than what the child wanted, because their love seeks the best interest of the child, not just their temporary comfort. In the same way, God's love guides His timing in our lives. Consider how love and timing are connected in everyday life. If you plant a seed, love for the plant means watering it at the right time, giving it sunlight at the right time, and waiting patiently for it to grow. If you try to rush the process, you don't help it, you harm it. The fruit will not mature, the roots will not develop, and the plant will not last. God's love is the same. He knows that if blessings come too soon before we are ready, they will not last or may even harm us. His timing is a safeguard, not a punishment. When we read Scripture, we find this theme again and again. Romans 5:6 says, at just the right time, Christ died for the ungodly. The most important event in human history happened not too soon, not too late, but at the precise moment God planned. That wasn't random. That was love. If God's timing was perfect in sending His Son for our salvation, why would His timing suddenly fail in the details of our daily lives? The same love that orchestrated redemption is the same love guiding the moments of our journey. Sometimes His timing feels slow because His love is patient. He is not only working on circumstances around us, He is also working inside of us. Love is willing to wait for the right moment. Just as a master artist patiently layers colors on a canvas, refusing to rush the process because the beauty depends on timing, God patiently layers experiences, lessons, and growth into our lives. If He rushed it, the masterpiece would be incomplete. But because He loves us too much to give us something half-formed, He waits until the timing is right. Other times, His timing feels too fast. Opportunities come suddenly, doors swing open without warning, and we feel unprepared. But even in those moments, His love is at work. He knows when we are ready, even when we doubt ourselves. His love sees strength in us that we sometimes overlook. His timing pulls us into places we might never step into if left to ourselves. Love not only waits, love also nudges. And in His timing, both the waiting and the nudging are perfectly balanced. When we begin to view delays through the lens of love, it changes everything. Instead of resenting the wait, we start to rest in the truth that God's heart is for us. Instead of doubting His care, we start to recognize His wisdom. Instead of comparing our timeline with others, we start to trust that His timeline for us is unique and purposeful. The more we trust His love, the less anxious we become about His timing. Anxiety comes from believing we are alone. Peace comes from knowing we are held by love. Think of how Jesus interacted with people in the Gospels. He never rushed, but he was never late. To Mary and Martha, his delay in coming to Lazarus looked like negligence, but in reality, it was love. His timing revealed God's glory in a way that immediate healing could not. The delay was not rejection. It was love positioning them for a greater miracle. This shows us that sometimes God's timing doesn't just answer our prayers, it exceeds them. At the heart of it all is this truth: God's timing is always an expression of his love for us. He is not bound by the pressure of our clocks, and he is not indifferent to our desires. He is carefully aligning our lives with his perfect plan. Every delay, every acceleration, every redirection is filtered through his love. He will never fail to show up. And when he does, it will always be the right moment. So when you feel like he is late, remind yourself that love cannot fail you. When you feel like you have been waiting too long, remember that love is protecting and preparing you. When his timing surprises you, trust that love has opened the door for a reason. The God who loves you enough to send his son for you is the same God who loves you enough to guide the moments of your life. His timing is always right because his love never fails.